Mike Friday on X. Deluded headline. Even more bullshit in the press release. Sevens series and World Rugby. Shameful, unprofessional, Machiavellian behaviour by those who've been given the responsibility to lead sevens at World Rugby. Beth Coulter and Vernon Pugh, two great administrators of yesteryear, will be turning in their graves. Do you lay the blame squarely at the door of World Rugby?
I do. I'm sorry, but I do. And I can say that because they can't say they're going to hold my funding to a 15s program. Look, let's speak as we find, right? World Rugby is the governing body, and they make a bucket load of money from the 15s World Cup, and the tier 2 and tier 3 nations rely on them to drive their programs. So they're scared to speak up. They're scared to speak up because if you speak up and you the hand that feeds you can hurt you. And I'm not being controversial. I'm just saying how life is. And I think the realities are that a lot of these countries need somebody to speak up for them. And I did that for a number of years on the Sevens circuit. It's no surprise that myself, David Nusifora, are no longer in that Sevens environment. And within 9-12 months, we're witnessing what we've just witnessed, and we stopped that all 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
This is nothing new. This is stuff that's been regurgitated from 3 or 4 years ago that was stopped. And
so what is your plea to them? And how quickly could this be fixed if people were prepared to open the door?
This could be quite easily fixed, is the fact that right now they're probably out there tendering for locations. They can reverse the series and revert it back to 12 and 12 to start with, because you need to preserve that, which now will give Kenya, Uruguay, Brazil their opportunities, and USA men. It will give them their opportunities to compete on the world circuit. We also now need to look at the model and go, well, actually, are we better off being an events, a union events model and a private events company, and we will just govern the game? And then all of a sudden, I would hazard a guess, within a year or two, that 25 million loss will drop significantly. Now, they could also choose to assign the rights in the event that we could find somebody that would take on the responsibility of working with the likes of Dubai and Hong Kong and those nations that want to put on events to create a credible World Series that can continue to build, and a Challenger Series underneath, which is important, and then work in that 3 months with those private companies that may or may not want to do a franchise league, because there is scope and opportunity. They can do that. They can do that now. They can reverse it. But what does that require? That requires people holding their hands up and going, do you know what? We got this wrong.
Right. Can I just at this point recap, because these are the headlines that I'm sure you'll have read about this week. So first of all, last Wednesday, the IRFU cut the Ireland men's sevens programme altogether. In a statement, it said a review concluded that the men's sevens programme, in inverted commas, does not contribute as a development pathway for the 15s game, adding that the provincial academy structures are offering greater development opportunities. So Ireland Sevens has gone, having had some very, very good moments over the last 10 years or so. Days later, Great Britain Sevens scrapped the full-time Sevens programme at the end of July for both men and women in favour of a part-time model. There will be no more permanent contracts, players instead coming together to train and play on the World Sevens Series. It's unclear whether investment in this new part-time model is equal from all three unions. I've actually spoken to people heavily involved in Great Britain Sevens, and apparently there is funding and an alternative route for that team to go forward. It hasn't been accepted at this point in time. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But both decisions are driven by financial constraint and the desire for a development pathway into the 15s game. We're talking about sort of the structure at the top, and what we're now seeing are the consequences at the bottom, where people are having contracts and livelihoods ripped up. Discuss your reaction to those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two are slightly different, but they are intrinsically linked by one common factor. So if we look at Team GB, they were looking, as part of the London Sevens event, to drive profits to feed back into that program to allow it to continue to be full-time. But again, the over-negotiation from the Sevens leadership at World Rugby has now made that event unviable from their perspective,
from the RFU perspective,
and too risky.
It's just not worth it.
Well, just the juice ain't worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
So the reality is that they've withdrawn, which then has a direct knock-on effect on what funding can be made available to Team GB, which as a result now means they go into a pay-for-play situation, which means they will struggle to compete on an 8-team tournament. So that's at the forefront there again. But what's the symptom? What's the cause? The cause is World Rugby's event strategy. That's the ultimate cause. When you look at the Ireland situation, I think they took advantage of the uncertainty, the unpredictability, the, dare I say it, incompetence of changing formats during season, in season, and they used it to their advantage to allow Ireland to fall away on the Sevens circuit for that 1 year. This is the same Ireland team that finished second on the World Series last year, came third in the World Cup 2 years back, were, dare I say it, a knock-on not seen away from competing for an Olympic medal in Paris. They were that good at the time, but they obviously had lost a lot of players, were on a period of transfer. So that I think their leadership has taken advantage of that, their performance leadership. They've seen it a different way. Humphrey sees it different to Nusafora, and it's convenient. But ultimately, the cause again is World Rugby's uncertainty and creating all of this mess in the whole arena. So, I think the cause sits at World Rugby. I think, interestingly enough, what Ireland are saying in terms of it doesn't affect their pathways and create 15s players. Hugo Keenan came through the Sevens circuit. Zach Ward, there's about 7 or 8 that are playing for Leinster. Tad Byrne was unwanted at Leinster in the academy, went to the Sevens before he went to Munster. So it does work. It's not all the time, every time, like it was in Haskell's day, where the Sevens was positioned in a different place. So that's the Ireland piece. The difference between the Ireland piece and the Team GB piece is that in the Irish school system, you don't play Sevens as part of your core curriculum of rugby. Now we flip across to Team GB, and you've got basically for the powers to be to say that it doesn't help on the pathway there from the 15s is utter rubbish from the ecosystem. All of our players, I look at my Lucas, I look at Pollock, Haskell in the day, but let's talk about the players right now. From the ages of 10 through to 18, a big part of their rugby diet is Sevens, because term 2 is all Sevens culminating in Rosslyn Park. Now, what that means is it's seen as a big pillar in the foundation of their rugby development. And Sevens, when they played Sevens, Pollock and Lucas, my Lucas wanted to be Folau Nua. Who knows Folau Nua? He was the man for USA Sevens as a playmaker. But you wouldn't know him on the 15s game. But and don't forget, like, Lucas wanted to be, I don't know, Danny Kerr on the 15s game. Yeah. So you can have idols and role models in both forms of the game. But within the ecosystem, Rugby Sevens is a big part of our rugby system. The very fact you don't see the return on investment, as you would call it, through in the 15s like you would if they play in their under-20s and their under-18s for England, and that's why we invest in that, because they become England internationals. Well, the reason they became those internationals at 18 and 20 was very much because of their varied rugby development and diet. And I think that gets lost. And then when you couple that with what happens now in the academy system, where at 18, how many are released now? Yeah. They go to university. You've got Bernsey building this university Sevens model that sits alongside, which feeds very nicely into the Team GB model, which doesn't compete with the Premiership academy piece. It complements and allows players to come in and out. Yes, it would be lovely to go back to the old days where you get some of the academy boys. I'd love nothing more than see my Lucas play on that. But that ship sailed. Yeah. But it means that you can come out, go back in, you can get let go by your academy, go into the Sevens route, maybe get picked up again like Will Muir. Yeah. There's all of those opportunities, but it just because it doesn't correlate to a direct pound and dollar, it doesn't mean that it's not complementing and adding to the ecosystem of rugby as a whole to build new audiences, to maintain numbers at the grassroots level. So we need this pinnacle, and I worry about it being part-time. Now, is that the unions in a holding pattern to hopefully World Rugby see sense? Could private entities come in and run the team? Absolutely. You could create a UK franchise league like the RPL with superstar players and development players and create money and funds which would then finance the team. But then will World Rugby recognise that as a possibility and a capability? Yeah. There are many answers that can be, and many solutions to this, but it requires common sense, pragmatic approach from World Rugby to start with, and then a collaboration at home union level in order for this to work and move forward.
So I would say two things at this point. We have invited someone from World Rugby to join us to offer a view, and I'm sure there are counter arguments to everything that you've said, and we've invited someone from the RFU to talk through their perspective on the decision that's been taken around Team GB, and unfortunately neither of those conversations have managed to make it to this table. We are always open for conversation and very much recognise there are two sides to every story. I suppose my question at this point is, if we keep going down the path that has been outlined here, with Ireland cutting it all together, Team GB as part-time, World Rugby running the events, where is Sevens going to be in 12, 24, 36? I mean, is Sevens place in the Olympics now in jeopardy if you look at the trajectory of the overall game? And the ramifications of that if it happens?
I think so. If we don't preserve a credible opportunity for all World Series, which you don't do with 8 teams, and we don't rethink how we present that and provide that invent experience as well as capitalise it, then I know that we're in 28. I'm not sure we're in 32. We could be. I'm not sure. That's a question I think we need answered. But I look at what's happening in the sporting landscape, and especially the Olympic landscape. Wait, flag football. I know it's like...
What is flag football?
American football touch with flags.
Okay,
so
right.
It's tag American football. Just recently, they're talking about allowing their NFL stars to play in that in 28.
So
yes,
bona fide NFL players will be playing tag football in the Olympics.
Yeah.
So
how will that work?
Well, they'll win.
Right.
But they'll be part of the American tags, a bit like they are in basketball when they come together, and they won't do a lot of training because they won't need to, and they'll walk the gold. And then you've also got this other.
But that is so diametrically opposed to every single thing we're talking about here.
One thing we always said with the Seven, because we talked about this off air, I mentioned it earlier. We always talked about that America with the sleeping giant. That that if we got Sevens in the Olympics, America would absolutely buy into it. We'd pick up all the NFL players. That's what we all said. It just hasn't happened. And I asked you, why has America, because the thing is, the flag football is going to absolutely fly, because it's going to go nuclear. Why did it not go nuclear for the Sevens? Because we were all banging that drum. Why did America not get behind it?
Well, they're different sports.
Yeah.
American football is the closed decision-making collision sport. High octane, heavily powerful, right?
Yeah.
6-second efforts. Rugby is a contact avoidance sport, and it's high endurance on the Sevens, right? So you've got complete opposite ends of the spectrums, even though athletically and aesthetically they look the same.
Yeah.
But then you also have the mentality piece, right? So you go from being a college player, which is, that doesn't make the NFL, but he's been played in front of 100,000 for 4 years, thinking he's going to earn millions, king of the world in his university. As a young man, you've got to get inside their heads, right?
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, I need you to come and play in front of nobody, learn these skills on dog shit park. You're not going to get paid. You're going to get shouted at. And
it's fucking hard.
It's really hard, and you have to work really hard for the next 4 years, and then you might get yourself onto the team. So for the first 6 months, they're all in hoo-ha, yeah. But after that, they realise, you know what, this ain't for me. And you've got the constraints of the sport, and then you've got the mentality. That's what made Carlin Isles and Perry Baker very special, that they were able to go through the attrition to get out the other side. But they found it before they got to college.
Yes.
Now, that's what Nate Ebner's a great example.
Yeah.
Played rugby, Ohio, walk-on, became the superstar NFL player, then came back. It's just too big a ask for true crossovers.
Whereas flag football...
Going to go and win a gold medal for my country. They never get to represent their country. No. And what have I got to do? I've just got to do 6-second efforts, but I've got to wear some tags and you can't hit me.
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah.
So I think if we don't sort ourselves out, we're in danger of losing what we created. And let's not forget how good Paris 2024 was.
Yeah.